Valerie, you're an American journalist working in the Balkans since 2010. In Kosovo, you started working in 2013. Why today you think that the Hassani indictment is so important?
Well, I can't think of any example in any European country where the top judge in the entire country is indicted for abuse of office like this. But I think we need to make sure that we understand that this is not actually about one man. If these allegations prove true, and we'll see that in the court, they raise major questions about how much thought is going into the agreements that are being made between the European Union and Kosovo, which have serious implications for Kosovo's sovereignty.
What specific do you mean? Can you run us through what agreements?
So Kosovo got to this point basically from the exchange of letters between Baroness Catherine Ashton, the former EU High Representative for Foreign Policy, and President Yahyaga. So in April 2014, I started investigating this story because they exchanged letters over the extension of EULEX's mandate. So there's one very unclear paragraph in this exchange of letters that deals with the extension of the mandates of Constitutional Court judges, or it has become the legal basis for their extension.
But you were a bit obsessed with the story much before it became a story. Why? What did you find so intriguing in this very legalistic matter?
It seems like a really small detail, but at the time, the three international judges who have been serving Kosovo's Constitutional Court since they were appointed by the ICO, their terms were set to expire at the end of October. There was a political crisis going on in the country, and it looked like the court was the only stable institution, and the court provided the only way out of the crisis. Yet, these international judges, I kept reading and looking at this exchange of letters, and you know, I'm American. Where I come from, the Constitution is the most important thing. So this exchange of letters referenced a couple of different articles of the Constitution, especially Article 114, and I kept going back to the Constitution, back to the letters, and I just didn't see how this could possibly have happened, how the judges could be reappointed without the parliament proposing them. Because according to the Constitution, the parliament proposes the judges and the president then appoints them based on the parliament's recommendation.
But as the EU officials justified at the time, it was all implicated in the exchange of letters that their mandate should be extended. Why didn't you believe that?
Well, I just wasn't satisfied. And you know, I was talking to my colleagues, I was talking to my friends, I was talking to anybody who would listen, that this could and would probably create problems in the future. But I didn't have any concrete proof, and I just kind of, you know, kept thinking about this and digging until finally I got proof that other people also had doubts about this, other people with a lot more power than I have.
Yes, doubts, but you still needed proof to publish the story you did.
Well,
how did you get the proof?
In my digging, I actually came across a document. It's called a standard processing form, but actually it has some very interesting information about how the judges got appointed. So this is a memo written by EULEX's legal team, and it shows that they were in contact with the president's office about how they could reappoint these three international judges. And according to the memo, the president really insisted that the three judges from the Constitutional Court, the three international judges, actually go before the parliament, that EULEX bring them before the parliament, since EULEX did have the mandate to propose them, but the Constitution still maintains that parliament needs to approve them. The president also wanted these judges to take an oath of office, because at this point, still to this point, that, you know, how can you serve something that you, or some country that you haven't taken an oath to? The memo also has another very interesting detail that actually EU personnel had approached the president of the Constitutional Court, former president Enver Hassani, and that he informally concurred with their assessment of the procedure, meaning that they didn't have to go to the parliament.
Why did you find this so strange? In Kosovo, all the diplomats concur all the time with our institutions.
Yes, perhaps, but I think that there's something very special about the Constitutional Court. I mean, maybe it's my American background, my love for the Constitution, and this is something that is taught to us, you know, from the moment we can read and from middle school, high school, and on. But, you know, nothing, no exchange of letters, no diplomat can be more important than a constitution. And the Constitutional Court, which is supposed to ensure the provision, the court is not supposed to treat any decision or take any informal decision. Any constitutional court decision must be formal and it must be public, and it cannot, there can be no discussion until someone actually asks the court to assess the constitutionality of a particular issue.
So what happened then? How does this indictment today relate to the investigation you did then? You called it Envelope 2 affair. Why?
Well, simply because here was another international institution handing the government of Kosovo 3 international officials who are to decide on some of the most important matters of the day. And in the intervening time, they indeed have decided some of the most important decisions, as 2 decisions on who could form the government, as well as a recent decision about whether or not the proposed association of Serb majority municipalities is legal. But in the course of my research, once I obtained this memo, I started, as any journalist would, going around to relevant parties, the EU mission, ULEX, the President's office, and of course other human rights bodies like the Ombudsperson. And I realized that the Ombudsperson was actually investigating the very same thing, that I wasn't the only one who thought there was something strange in these exchange of letters and in the reappointment. And so it was the Ombudsman actually who brought a case before the Constitutional Court saying that the appointment of the judges was not constitutional.
What would you say to the critics who actually think that was political, because everybody was political, including the Ombudsman, by bringing this case? What would you say to that?
The Constitutional Court is one institution of the country which simply cannot be political. I mean, and there can be no shortcuts. That's what I would say. And I think, I cannot speak for the Ombudsperson, but as a journalist, I just wanted to find the truth.
Yes, but do you think, how important was the story to take to the court, for the Ombudsman to take it on? Did you believe that that was not political?
Well,
what would happen in
time,
your country?
In my country, of course, it would go to the court. I mean, it would be unthinkable that some diplomats or some formal, I don't know, or informal discussions, that anyone could have an informal discussion with any justice of the Supreme Court, which is our constitutional court, or that, that in my country we would allow someone else to help us decide who the justices were going to be without taking them before the Congress. I mean, this
so
would
what
be
happened when you went to talk to relevant institutions like Ombudsman and you found out they're doing the same research? What happened then?
So then the Ombudsman brought a case before the court, but what he requested these interim measures. So he requested actually that the appointment of these judges be suspended. And a month later, his request came back that it was inadmissible. And I was also I'm not a lawyer, but I also found that very strange, and a number of other lawyers, I believe, found that strange, including the Ombudsman. And he was most confused about why the 3 international judges had not recused themselves from this decision, since it's this decision which affects their salaries, their jobs, their livelihoods. And I would argue that in in the countries where they're from, there's one American judge, one Portuguese judge, and one Bulgarian judge. I think they would have to recuse themselves from a case like this.
Because the complaint was against them.
Because it was not against them, but it was against the process of their appointment and their salary, their livelihood, their mortgage payment, whatever it is, depends on the salary and their position in the court. So it would be only logical that they recuse themselves. So former Ombudsman Cortesi started sending letters to the 3 international judges and to former court president Hassani and to the judge rapporteur on the case, Artarama Hairizi, who is now the president of the court, asking why they didn't recuse themselves. He also asked former court president Hassani why he didn't recuse himself, because in the memo there was proof that he had already consulted on this matter. So,
and what was the answer? Did you get an answer?
He didn't get any answer for a while. Then he sent a follow-up letter, and only one person answered, and that was the American judge, Robert Carolyn, who hand-delivered a letter to the Ombudsman's office saying that, in fact, he had sent a letter of recusal, but either it hadn't been received or I won't speculate too much more about that, because I think this is now the subject of the prosecution's investigation.
So what is the prosecution actually indicting Hassani for? Can you explain exactly what bit of falsification you're talking about?
According to the indictment, which I've seen and read, there are 2 counts. One is for abuse of office, for issuing this decision, and the second is for allegedly falsifying the name of Judge Carolyn as somebody who had been present in voting on this decision on admissibility, that when they decided that the Ombudsman's original complaint was inadmissible.
And what does this say, what are the repercussions of this beyond, fast forward today, fast forward in the controversial decision that the Constitutional Court made about the parliamentary group? What was the political context then? What is the political context now?
Well, I mean, the Constitutional Court is the foundation of democracy, of rule of law, which every person I've met during my time as a journalist in Kosovo just wants to see established here. Coming from America, you know, if you told anyone that the role of Congress would be diminished in the appointment of a judge to the highest court and given to an international organization, this would be a huge problem. I think that one of the main issues here is that even though this seems like a really technical case with so many elements, it's really simple. The Assembly's power to propose judges to the Constitutional Court cannot be removed. I mean, the Assembly is the only link between the people and the Constitutional Court, who are supposed to ensure the people's democracy. And if the role of the Assembly, if the role of the people is diminished in that, it has serious implications for any democracy.
Finally, from the talks you've had with these legal sources, legal international people, as well as all the parties involved, what do you think is the motivation behind these three judges deciding that it's okay for their mandate to be extended and still being in this court?
Sure. Well, I think the question of whether or not there should be international judges on the Constitutional Court it's a debate that's very active and very topical, but it's for another time. But I think I should correct you maybe that it wasn't the Constitutional Court judges who themselves decided. I mean, this was a deal made between the European Union and Kosove. And, you know, in the last 18 months, I think, you know, this is now a second deal. After last month, the Constitutional Court said that 5 parts of the deal on the association of Serb majority municipalities were
unconstitutional. You're saying it's a second deal that is legally questionable, right?
Sure. I mean, this one has not been, this exchange of letters is not being challenged in the court, but its repercussions are. And I think it raises serious questions about the types of deals that Kosovo is making with the EU. You know, it raises questions about what kind of legal advice Kosovo is getting. Is is Kosovo too trusting of the EU? I think this is a debate that should be, and hopefully already is, going on in all of the chambers of the president's office and in the government, because, you know, Kosovo is going to enter into more and more and more agreements with the EU and agreements brokered by the EU, and they really need to make sure that they're constitutional.
But what do you say to everybody who thinks that, to other side who thinks that this brings a question to international treating Kosovo with double standards? Maybe like a banana republic, if we'd be more cynically saying it so? They are doing things here that they wouldn't do in their countries?
I mean, certainly I hope that something like this would never happen in my country, but I think that, you know, the onus is on Kosovo to analyze all of these agreements, to really do rigorous analysis. I mean, the memo that I got shows that the president's office knew what needed to be done and what should be done. And I understand that there were a lot of implications.
So why did they give up to pressure? Why?
Again, I cannot pretend to be inside of their minds, but let's remember
Hassani too.
In 2014,
he's considered as an intelligent professor of University of Pristina. Why do you think they gave up? They did the compromises they did.
I mean, let's take a step back and remember, you know, the summer of 2014, the fall of 2014, Kosovo was in a political crisis. There was a stalemate. People were relying on the Constitutional Court to decide, in fact, which party had the right to govern. And this decision also has huge implications for the future of Kosovo and the future results of elections. But I think, you know, the Constitutional Court at that time was the only really functioning institution. There was no assembly, there was no government, you know, to put the Constitutional Court into crisis by not having 3 judges on it because the parliament could not propose them would have been a major problem. But I think that anyone who is embarking on this type of work needs to remember that shortcuts normally they can lead to unintended and negative consequences. And I think this was a shortcut.
Valerie Hopkins, thanks very much.